It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And now that I think about it, Anthony, I think my mother was incorrect. I think my mom was off by a couple days. I think my bar mitzvah was February 15th, 2003, not February 13th, 2003.
Oh.
Yeah, my mom texted me earlier today going, happy bar mitzvah anniversary. At which point I started doing the math because I'm apparently a masochist and realized that my bar mitzvah, whether it was actually 21 years ago today or 21 years ago Thursday, was 21 years ago. My bar mitzvah can have a drink legally.
Wow. You're young,
hurts. Man. It hurts. I'm a young man. I'm not as young as I used to be. But since that day, Anthony Haney, I have been a man.
We love to hear it, man.
That's how that allegedly works. Here's what we got coming up on the show today. Josh Robbins will join us later on in the show. He wrote a really interesting piece on how the Wizards acted the trade deadline, including giving Kyle Kuzma some say on whether or not he got traded. Is that a cause for concern? Are they letting the players dictate things in a way that is reminiscent of Bradley Beal's no trade clause? They had to let Bradley do it because it was in his contract. But what about other players like Kyle? We will discuss coming up with Josh at 6 p.m. I also made a field trip today. Anthony actually joined me for part of this trip, and then he had to leave before the good part. So Anthony has not heard this yet, but he did help me in the setup process. Made a little field trip to Bethesda, where this morning U.S. Soccer announced a friendly coming up on June 8th against Colombia ahead of the Copa America this summer, World Cup in 2026. U.S. men's national team will play at FedEx Field for the first time since 2012. And I got to talk about, not really that, but I got to talk about the team with head coach Gregg Berhalter. Greg, 2 G's, Gregg Berhalter. So that was a really interesting conversation. You will hear it coming up in the 6 o'clock hour as well. But we start, I mentioned those things because we kind of have a bit of an open line situation for the first time here on Vibe Check Tuesday. I do want to talk some Commanders, and I'm sure many of you have thoughts on this Commanders coaching staff, and I would like to get them from you at 301-230-0980. However, we also had no time yesterday to take calls on the Super Bowl, so whether that's Kyle Shanahan decision-making, whether that is Patrick Mahomes' greatness, whether that is Chiefs' greatness, Spagnuolo, whatever it is, our Chiefs defense greatness, Spags, whatever it is, Super Bowl is on deck. Also, obviously, we still have our eye on the big story around Monumental Sports. Monumental today did get a win of some kind, but also there were some losses as things are making their way through the final days of the Virginia legislature. The big win they got is the House version of their funding bill passed. Now that can be passed to the Senate, who, as we told you yesterday, thanks to a visit from Eric Flack and us informing you, thanks to the reporting of others, that the Senate version of that had died in the Finance Committee. It didn't even get a consideration, nevertheless consideration of the full Senate. But now that it has passed the House in the Virginia State Legislature, it can be considered, that version of it, by the Senate. But there were some more state senators that came out today saying, including a delegate, actually I shouldn't say more state senators, one of the state delegates that voted no on this today in the House side is the delegate from Alexandria. So local pushback is growing. Obviously, we have the Senate that's like, Youngkin's in a weird spot because he obviously wants this to happen, but now he's made all the Democrats mad. So that is still very much in the air. My 2 cents prediction at this stage in the process is this thing gets done. The Wizards and Caps will still move to Virginia in a very nice arena, but it is going to cost Ted Leonsis not only more of his money to fund it, less public funding, but it is also going to cost him extra lobbying money. His lawyers are going to be, and his lobbyists are going to get bigger checks than he initially accounted for to try to win over some of the votes in the Senate and the House in the state of Virginia. So, the Commonwealth, as we call it. So, all of that is on the table. 301-230-0980. It is essentially an open line Tuesday, vibe check Tuesday. We can check your Commanders vibes. We can check your Wizards vibes. We can check your Super Bowl 58 vibes. We can check your Monumental Sports doing whatever they're doing vibes. 301-230-0980. Anthony, is there one of those topics that is most vibey to you, that is most interesting to you?
I would probably say the coaching hires, maybe.
No, what's your vibe on the coaching hires? Because I am very mixed.
I mean, I think you articulated it better than I could have. I think.
Well, I did that to you, not on the air. So I either need to then repeat what I said, or you need to tell the people what I said.
Yeah. So I just like the fact that we have coaches that were in higher places now in lower places, so they have the experience there, and then it's just a good teaching point as well. I'm just having that kind of experience on one staff. But you look at Cliff Kingsbury. He's a former head coach. He's now our OC. You look at Pagano, former coordinator, and now he's I forgot his
He's going to be a senior defensive assistant.
Yeah.
Whatever that means.
It's just good.
Good brain to have in the room.
Exactly. A lot of experience that we'll have on our team.
Yeah, no, I love what they're doing on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, what Dan Quinn has established is one of the strongest coaching staffs on the back end. And by the way, it still could grow. One thing that I've kind of been thinking about is, this is certainly, I'm not the only one thinking this, is remember how Dallas turned them down on Al Harris?
Mm-hmm.
What position is not filled yet?
DBs.
DBs is not filled yet. They just hired Mike Zimmer. Now, Dallas could very well be like, no, we're hanging on to Al Harris, and Mike Zimmer could keep him. And that would probably be smart. That would probably be a good idea. But he could also get wiped out if Mike Zimmer brings in his own guys, and Al Harris could all of a sudden become available, and then there's nothing Dallas can do about that. So I wonder if DQ knows something there and Joe Witt knows something there, and they just have to be a little bit patient. They tried to get the tight ends coach from Dallas. That's not going to happen because they're not making any more changes on the offensive staff, and they obviously did hire a tight ends coach here, someone that's actually worked with Cliff before. So but I do wonder on the defensive side of the ball if there are more highly qualified guys who know the system coming. And then Norton is as good of a linebackers coach as there is in the league. And then defensive line is the other big missing piece right now, but DQ has always been a defensive line specialist, so he will probably be a little bit more hands-on there than he will arguably with any other unit in the league or on the team. So he'll still be mostly a head coach, but if he steps in / quality control of your defensive line is pretty high when Dan Quinn is your head coach. So with that all said, the defense I feel great about. The offense I have a ton more questions about. Yeah. And we can get into that, and we can take your calls on it next. 301-230-0980. Phone lines are wide open on the Ace Law listener line, 301-230-0980. Every line open. Let's change that by the time we get back. Vibe Check Tuesday is on here on the Team 980. Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And it's a Vibe Check Tuesday, and apparently the vibes are dead. Not a single person calling, Anthony. What are we doing? I hate when I have to chastise the callers.
Maybe they're upset that, we don't have football until September.
I mean, sure, but we got radio shows to do, and people care about stuff more than football. And also, you can call and talk about football. Like, we're not here to tell you can't talk about football. We're throwing it out there. I said you can talk about the Super Bowl. You can talk about the Commanders' coaching staff hires. About to blind myself with this light. Oh, right in the face. And yet, what do we got? We got the old goose egg. The old Jamie Tart Poopa. The old Nunya. The old how many games the Washington Commanders won in the final 7 of the season. Ouch.
Yeah, that was a low blow.
It was. All right. Let's see if we can get some calls going. 301-230-0980. So, Vibe Check Tuesday. Pretty much anything you want. It's probably also the problem. Let's do this. Let's start off taking calls on the Commanders coaching staff. If someone feels really, really jazzed up about the Super Bowl, Kyle Shanahan, about whatever else, then we'll throw it in. But let's try to get some calls going on the Commanders coaching staff, because I do think on the offensive side of the ball, I have some questions. They hire a guy in Bobby Johnson who I'm not really sure what the appeal is, other than clearly Brian Daboll really liked him. He brought him from Buffalo. They worked well together. I respect Daboll a lot. So that definitely means something to me. But at the end of the day, he was in charge of one of the worst lines in football the last couple of years, and that's the biggest job that he's ever had. Because it's also not like he's been a really successful, coach elsewhere with this long track record of success. It's funny because you Google his name and it's a bunch of articles being like, this is baffling. I don't get it. And it's like, yeah, I don't really have a justification for you. He was a grad assistant in Akron in 1995-96. Then he was a defensive line coach. And then he coached tight ends and O-line, then O-line in Indiana for 4 years. That got him a professional job because he got bumped up in Buffalo to the Bills, assistant O-line coach. But then he coached tight ends. And by the way, I love a tight ends coach as much as anybody, but I like my O-line coach to have a track record of being a good O-line coach in the NFL, or this to be his first O-line coach job in the NFL. So he was the O-line coach in Buffalo with Daboll in 1920. He was the tight ends coach in Oakland before that. He's also worked as the tight ends coach and assistant O-line coach in Detroit and tight ends coach in Jacksonville. And then he was the Giants O-line coach the last 2 years, and then he just got hired here in D.C. And there just doesn't, the Wikipedia page is not, super impressive either. Because often it talks about, he was here and he worked with X, and they had a career season. And it's just kind of he was the coach, and then he was the coach, and then he was the coach, and then he was moved to the other coach, and now coach. So there definitely is some player personnel issues in New York, why their offensive line was bad. And also I should say, Dan Quinn has obviously studied what they were doing from a protection standpoint and must have signed off on this because he's the head coach. And maybe Cliff went to Dan and was like, hey, I'm looking for this. Do you think, who do you think? And he's like, I know the results weren't that great, but I like what New York did from a plan perspective, and I think we can execute it better with X, Y, or Z, or on certain types of things that you use a lot in your offense. These guys are very smart, but there doesn't seem to be the resume that stacks up on the O-line coach side of things that makes it make sense. I'm excited to talk to Logan more about it when he goes back and watches some tape, and I'll try to pop in some Giants tape of my own over the next couple of days/weeks. Obviously, next couple of weeks we'll be heading towards Indy in the Combine, but definitely a question that will be asked whenever it is that they hold a press conference. All right, now we got a whole bunch of phone calls, so let's get it going. We'll start with some of these calls on the Commanders coaching side of it, but we have a bunch of calls on the Monumental Sports stuff. We have stuff on the Wizards, so we will get to kind of everybody as we go here. Let's start off, though, with Vaughn. Vaughn, thanks for calling. Get us started on this Vibe Check Tuesday on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. You touched on something, and I just kind of like a little, I'm very bothered by it. One of the coaches on the coaching staff, and I just, for the life of me, I just don't understand that O-line coach move that they did from the Giants. I know you brought up some of the resume thing, and I'm following you on that, and I just don't understand the ideology of that whole situation of hiring him, far as just without offensive line situations and circumstances. And I'm a little old school into, if you look at the Gibbs and the Parcells and the I forgot the San Francisco, back in that time, San Francisco.
Bill Walsh.
Bill Walsh. I'm looking at the coaching staff. They won and have been successful because they had a strong coaching staff, personality-wise,
For sure.
And that goes a long way. And just to make a long story short, that concerns me. I might be a little old school, but you didn't go get Philly's O-line coach or the assistant O-line coach, anything like
Right.
that. I just don't see the history of it. So I don't mean to be babbling, but I'm just frustrated about that.
No, thanks for the call, Vaughn. I get it. And, like, the best thing, I think sometimes when people call in, right, like, I was expecting a call at some point today. I'll just go ahead and do it because Anthony and I talked about this yesterday in a different part of the show. But, like, if people were to call in and be like, hey, Kyle Shanahan got away, abandoned the run in the start of the second half, I can explain to you how that happened pretty easily. Like, Ant, when we went through it yesterday, you were, like, ready to murder Kyle, and then you were like, oh, I kind of get it. Like, it's an unfortunate circumstance, yeah?
Yeah, to an extent.
Like, could he have made different choices? Yeah, but, like, he made an understandable choice to break a tendency of running the football, and then he got bad down in distance, and then all of a sudden you have 9 plays of a 3-and-out where Christian McCaffrey touches the ball once, and, that stat in isolation makes you look like a boob. This one, I don't really have a lot for you as to why. That's not saying it's damned and it's not going to work, but I simply cannot explain to you why you take a guy with this little experience coaching O-line at one of your most important positions and put him in charge when he's coming off of being fired. But he has been in the NFL a long time. Maybe some of his pass pro stuff in the gun is specifically very good. Maybe his talent development, he has developed a couple of good young players, including Andrew Thomas, to an all-pro level. Maybe that's what they see as the necessity here. I tell you, the guy that I really want to talk to about this is the guy who crashed our show on Radio Row last week. We got to get Justin Pugh on the phone because he played for Cliff in Arizona, and then he wound up coming off the couch last year and playing for New York. So he's got experience with both guys. So we need to get Justin Pugh on the phone. How do we get Justin Pugh on the phone? Do we go through Syracuse connections? Do I email the people who at Lovesack who got him on with us last week? What do we do, Anthony?
Do we start a campaign on Twitter?
Do we just start tweeting him? Justin, we need you back on the show. I think we have some strings we can pull.
Okay.
Everybody tweeted Justin Pugh. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. That would be obnoxious. Might work, but would be obnoxious. All right, let's go back to the Ace Law listener line at 301-230-0980. If you're in a wreck, Ace Law helps you get a check. Call 8888 Ace Law. Let's go to Kenny real quick on this commander staffing stuff. Kenny, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, appreciate the call, fellas. I'm a little disturbed by some of the calls we getting, about the coaching staff, so on and so forth. Like, I'm looking at the overall picture of what DQ has done, and it really shows that his past experience, his work, and the jobs that he's done elsewhere is well respected, and he's getting some really, talented men of standards, who got resumes other places, and then one disagreement or in maybe who was hired, and people are like bent out of shape. You know what I'm saying? Like it's almost like, people just way too picky, man. I remember when I was growing up, we ain't know what a defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator was. You know what I'm saying? Like now this is a whole discussion. I just knew about Joe Gibbs, and that was it. You know what I mean?
The thing is, though, like Joe Gibbs had some great guys on staff, and I think that's whether you know about him or not doesn't make it any more or less important. I do think sometimes, to your point though, like the fan level of outrage on certain things when they didn't hear about these guys until 5 seconds ago is a little funny to me, because I work in the league and I didn't know a lot of these guys, and that's why I'm not going to sit here and be like, this guy definitely sucks. I'm not gonna do that because I don't know. But I will say, unlike a lot of, or Kenny, I'll just finish the sentence and I'll let you respond real quick. But like, unlike a lot of coaches or decisions that get made where I can at least explain them even if I disagree, I don't really understand this one. I haven't gotten to that level yet.
Yeah, I think there's just, it's so many variables when it comes to coaching, and I'm sure you understand that, Craig. Like,
for sure,
you coaching men, people get injured, contract situations. Sometimes, depending on what's going on in the locker room, morale, everything. You know what I mean? Like, all of these variables go into it, and if you don't always have all of the ingredients, you can't necessarily make the best meal. But I'm hoping that with this staff, they'll give him the right ingredients and really see if he can chef it up for us.
Yeah, no, 100%, Kenny. It's a great call. Thank you. And one thing that Kenny just brought up there that I should mention is, like, the Giants on their O-line have been devastated by injuries the last couple of years. So maybe it's just as simple as that. Maybe Bobby Johnson's a really good O-line coach who people look at and be like, I cannot believe they mostly kept their quarterbacks upright, because they have been so banged up. Obviously, talking about the run game side of it, Saquon continues to be an explosive player and get big explosive gains on a somewhat regular basis. So maybe they look at the run schemes and how they fit with what Cliff wants to do, and some of the stuff they've had to deal with injury-wise in New York, and they go like, yeah, the overall statistics aren't good, but like, we watch the tape, we see the process, and the process is there. So that should be something we're able to ask Cliff Kingsbury later in the week. I do think there will be a press conference later in the week. So we'll see if ultimately the coordinators, speak. And when they do, like, they'll certainly have to answer this question, whether it's now, whether it's in the spring, training camp, probably, honestly, the way the media works, we'll have to answer it all 3 times and more. When we get back here on the Hoffman Show, more of your calls, 301-230-0980. Looks like some of the calls on hold want to talk about this Monumental Sports situation, the Wizards moving to Virginia along with the Capitals, but not so fast, says the Virginia State Legislature. We'll talk about that and more next on the Team 980. just found the most incredible refereeing mic'd up clip. You're going to have to wait to hear it. It will be in Real Things later. Anthony, I can't wait for you. Did you listen to it? I just sent it to you.
Nah, I haven't seen it yet, but I'm about to check it out.
I didn't think that you had a chance to see it before the break. 1,000% hilarious. Just perfect, no notes. I just sent it to like 70 people. But unless you're one of my friends who just got that clip from me on Instagram, Real Things, Real People set into real microphones and mic'd up referee that you have to hear coming up. Following our interview with U.S. men's national soccer team coach Gregg Berhalter at 6:30, Real Things at 6:45 to close out the show. Right now, though, it is a Vibe Check Tuesday, and we're taking your calls on the Ace Law listener line at 301-230-0980. Let's go to Lap. Lap, thanks for calling. What's up, bro? You're back on the show.
Hey, what's up, Greg? Hey, coaching staff, I'm for the Commanders, I'm going to wait and see what happens. I just want to get them tight ends going and use the offense, the receivers, the running backs. I just want to see if they can get them going and utilize the talent that we do have, add some more talent, see what we do in this draft. And hopefully, man, I want to get some wins in the division, man, because we can't keep being last place in the division. So that's the only thing I'm looking forward to, hoping that they can improve. As far as the monumental sports aspect of it, I'm probably the die-hardest Wizard fan, Craig. I'm just upset with this, man. It just, even though with this little baby win and even I'm trying to block it with the Senate yesterday or whatever, I think it's still just going to happen, man. I mean, Ted's a businessman. It seems like that's what he's more about. A lot of the owners are too, of course, not saying that they don't want to win, but it's a business entity to this. So we just, I guess, just have to see. I'm wondering, do you think they possibly can change it to a Virginia team, and take out the DC? Because it's like, if you trying to take our teams out of DC, man, it's like you might as well change them, to the state that they're in.
Well, I mean, would you say that they should change?
I'm hoping that we can get the Commanders back, though, to DC. So,
well, that's the thing, too, is like, no, they won't do that. Lap, thanks for the call. They won't do that. That's kind of the thing. And when Virginia people want to scream about, well, how come it's cool that, you take the team out of Maryland and put it in D.C.? And I'm like, what are they called? This whole, this region is super weird because there's 3 jurisdictions, and it's just not like that anywhere else. There are other places with 2. New York City deals with this with teams and both football teams that play in New Jersey. You got the New York Knicks that play in as New York as it gets, so to speak, in Manhattan. And then you have the Brooklyn Nets, but they go by Brooklyn. Then you got, the New York Islanders played in the same building for a while, but now we're back on Long Island, which was weird for a second because, they're called the Islanders, but they're not on Long Island. Like, there's these little nuances of locality everywhere. I mean, San Francisco 49ers are an iconic franchise whose biggest city that they play, they're not even the biggest city that they're close to. They play in Santa Clara, which is right outside of San Jose, which is a pretty major American city. But at least it's still the Bay Area, which is, all due respect to Oakland and San Jose, San Francisco is by far the biggest city in that region. So, these kinds of quirky things happen, but, to not pretend like the reason that this region is what it is, even if it's shifting, even if a lot more business is going to Tyson's Corner, for instance, in Virginia, it's there because of its proximity to Washington, D.C. The district is at the center of it all, spiritually, geographically, emotionally, culturally, logistically, all of it. And so I don't mind them moving the practice facility, but to pretend like, oh, it's fine just moving to Virginia and call it D.C. and say that you're still for the district, no, that's not how any of this actually works, except for you, the rich guy who owns it and his company in Monumental Sports. Let's go to OG Ricardo. who has more on this on a Vibe Check Tuesday. Ricardo, what's up, man? Thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
What's up with you, Craig? It's a Vibe Check Tuesday. I like that. Look, first of all, the music you just played, man, thanks a lot because you reminded me. I forgot the day was Fat Tuesday.
Yes,
Mardi
it is.
Gras Day. Yeah, I forgot. And I got folks down there in New Orleans. I got to send a happy Mardi Gras message down to them,
Yeah,
man.
Anthony,
Thanks
did
for
you
reminding.
know when you played Trombone Shorty that it was Fat Tuesday? Was that a conscious choice, or did we just get lucky?
You got lucky, but I did know today was Fat Tuesday.
Yeah, but yeah, the Trombone Shorty on Fat Tuesday, we'll take the luck. We'll take some good luck, you know?
Man, I've seen a Trombone Shorty. Sean, I forgot, it was Sean Andrews, I think is his name. But anyway,
Yeah.
that Trombone Shorty, bad dude. I actually
For
saw
sure.
him play a free concert up here in D.C. A couple of summers ago. Yeah, he's a bad man. But look, okay, as far as the coaching with the Commanders, I'm going to trust the process. I know I'm a little concerned about the offensive line coach, but I don't know. They're assembling this coaching staff. Let's just hope it'll all work, and that's all we can hope for. Oh, shout out to my man Lapp. Yeah, man. He's Hall of Famer. After super producer, no Lapp is a Hall of Famer. So shout out to Lapp. He always give me a shout out here and there. Hope he's doing well. And now to the monumental disaster. Now, yesterday, I really appreciated how you articulated things with this situation, and it's not good. But I do hope that this small battle will lead to win the whole war on this. The small battle that we won, as far as, and God bless that senator, state senator, the honorable state senator. I forgot to check her name, but. That she actually said something about not passing this when Leonsis first made this announcement about trying to move the team.
Sure did.
It's like, okay, we're not having this, man. We can't get schools built. And when you really think about it, it's a slap against the citizens of that part of Virginia and the rest of Virginia. It's like, okay, only thing they care about is the wealthy Northern Virginia. And, you know, the heck with the rest of the state. Doc Walker made some good comments today, too, on Chris Russell's show, even though I think he kind of changed his tune. But once he heard the state senator and what she said, I appreciated what Doc was talking about today, just the social aspect of this, that the rich get richer. We're giving welfare to Leonsis and, you know, the heck with the rest of the state that needs money for other more important things. You know, this building, this stadium, and the arena is not going to benefit the rural state, the Tidewater area. So I'm really certainly hoping that this, you know my feelings, that this does not pass. We need to keep this back in the city. Maybe Mayor Bowser is playing her cards right, because they're also saying as far as it could be a gap year where, you know, she may not allow them to continue, the Wizards and Caps to continue to play at the arena. I guess I don't know if you read Bowser's column in the Sunday paper.
I did.
She had a big copy, right? And so she laid out her opinion on what was what. Encouraged a lot of people to read that, and let's just hope this fails and it just be egg in Leonsis' space. Because this is yeah, again, you call it, this is basically welfare for the rich. When you know, they call it subsidies, but you know, when people that need welfare, you got these people turning up their noses and they call that welfare. But what about the welfare for the rich? Don't call it subsidies. All this is welfare for the rich.
Or call it subsidies
again,
for everybody to get what they need to get whatever it is they're trying to get done. Ricardo, thanks for the call. We got to keep it moving, but I appreciate you calling in and call back anytime. I will say, you know, let's not pretend this isn't complicated when it comes to the politics and the policy and how the money works, right? I'm not an economics professor. I do occasionally have economics professors on the show. But what I will say in reading a little bit more about this too, when we talk about the divergence in funds between downstate and Northern Virginia, like most of the tax money comes from Northern Virginia. So, like, that's an argument on that side of things. But at the same time, like, are you really going to put that money to use for an arena when you could be paying for schools? Is that actually how that money works? Is it worth it because it's an investment and the new tax zones and the tax revenue that'll be raised on games now can help fund those schools and fund the bridges and fund the other stuff. Like, sometimes it is worth doing what the rich person wants because they'll create a thing with money that otherwise wouldn't be there on their side of it. The partnership ultimately then launches into something else. But, like, I think what economists, actual ones, will tell you is that stadiums don't actually do that. Stadiums don't really move the meter in terms of money. They aren't actual good investments for cities, and I think that should be taken into account here. Nevertheless, the cultural and elements of it all and the society or the societal elements of the fact that the people who, well, yes, they will fill the stadium for the Wizards, especially if they're good in Northern Virginia. It will not be filled with the same people who have supported this team since 1979, despite never having seen a 50-win season. That feels wrong to me, in the same way that it feels wrong that the Warriors moved out of Oakland, in the same way that it feels wrong that the Pistons moved initially to Auburn Hills and now they've moved back. It is, and the way it all happened feels so sloppy. And I think this is the thing that really bothers me the most about Leonsis and the way that he did it, is he thought that by being declarative with what he wanted to do, of moving to Northern Virginia, we're taking both teams, we're going to build a practice facility, we're going to move the Mystics, the Go-Go will stay in the Mystics practice facility, will stay in Congress Heights. Like, he had a plan. The fact that that plan was not signed off on by all parties participating in the plan bothers me immensely. You don't get to dictate to a city government what it is that you're doing with their land. It's not how this works. I don't care how rich you are. They own it. They're bigger than you. And so I do that. That is one of the things that really bothers me about how this all went down, is that nobody's on the same page, and yet they had this big announcement, and now it feels like they're trying to force it instead of coming to an agreement that is truly best for all, which, by the way, would include more space somewhere for Monumental and could potentially even include the Caps moving to Northern Virginia. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Got a couple more calls, but have a couple lines open, so we'll take our final calls in this hour on Vibe Check Tuesday. Then Nikki Jhabvala joins us at 5 o'clock to talk about the Commanders' coaching staff here on the Team 980. 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube, where you're getting the Anthony Solo dance cam. At the Team 980. I got to see Trombone Shorty live. We got to go. Anthony, that's a good class field trip. What's Trombone Shorty's concert schedule?
Let's do some Go-Go's then, Craig.
Tour.
There they go.
Let's see. I feel like he is coming soon.
He will be in Wilkes-Barre,
Pennsylvania, coming up in a little bit. He's in Toronto, the end of the week. I'll be in Ohio. Kingston, New York,
DC.
Fort Chester.
June 15th, 2024.
Okay. That's doable at this time. He's also at Hollywood Casino in Charlestown, which is semi-local, March 2nd, although I can't do that day.
These tickets go on sale actually on Friday.
I feel like we need to get tickets.
Yes.
All
I'll
right.
be down to go.
Let's do it.
Let's do it then.
All right. Fine. Threaten me with a good time. Class field trip. Although, man, I want to go June 11th, right before. He's
in NC?
Yeah, he's got a couple of these. He's doing it in Boston too, Bridgeport. He's doing shows with Big Boy from Outkast.
I do see that now.
Where's Huber Heights? Oh, that's June 20th. He's in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, a.k.a. Kelsey Town, USA, with Big Boy. Why does the Wolf Trap show not have Big Boy?
That's a great question.
That would be sick. Also, of course, he's at the New Orleans Jazz Festival.
Mm-hmm.
May. That would be fun. Anyway, Anthony and I just made ourselves a field trip.
Make sure you...
On
there
Friday,
you go.
yeah.
Calendar.
Yeah. Hey, Siri, remind me Friday at 10 a.m., check Trombone Shorty tickets. Oh, you're not gonna talk back? Come on, Siri. This is radio.
Wow.
Rude.
Any other time, she'd interrupt the show?
Yeah, she has no problem doing it literally any other time. Now I just dropped my phone on the ground. Anyway, the point is, it's a Vibe Check Tuesday, and we're taking your calls at 301-230-0980. Let's get one last one in before we head to chat with Nikki Jhabvala at the top of the hour on the Commanders coaching search. Again, the Ace Law listener line, if you're in a wreck, call Ace Law. If you're in a wreck, they can get you a check, 8888 Ace Law. Let's go to David. David, thanks for holding. You're on the Hoffman Show.
How's it going?
Going well.
Well, I had as far as coaching hiring, I think we're at like an A- overall. Bobby Johnson, I think people are freaking out a little much. If you look at the overall, the GM drafting was horrible. They weren't given no depth. So if you had an injury, you had a scrub playing with starters. That doesn't work. I think it's an okay hire, and we'll see.
Yeah, no, it's a big we'll see. I do think that there's an undeniable element that they missed on some draft picks. Like Evan Neal has not worked out in New York, and there's been some other guys that have not really done well, and their GM situation there has been in flux. But I mean, I certainly hope that here we see that there was a coaching issue here, and that maybe the GM talent evaluation acquisition process was a little bit better than it seems right now. So, like, these are the kinds of things that you have to deal with realistically in the NFL, and it's hard to parse out for those of us watching from the outside. But this is why, like, Cliff Kingsbury and Dan Quinn and, whoever else watched tape. And, like, I will say this about Bobby Johnson as the Giants O-line coach. Dan Quinn had to prepare for him twice a year the last couple of years. And if he thought he was terrible, there's no way that the most important position coach on your team, non-coordinator style, gets hired to if he's bad. If Dan Quinn is like, that guy's protections suck. It was easy to run against them or to stop the run against them, like I was not impressed, then he's probably like, Cliff, we're going to find somewhere else. And instead, they go this direction. But I'm not sure exactly what they really liked about him. The stats are obviously not very good, but we'll see. Also brought in David Ray. We have to get a pronunciation on his last name. Apologies if I just murdered it. But he was the tight ends coach for Cliff in Arizona for a year. Also spent last year as a senior assistant to Canellis down in Tampa. So some good experience there on top of some college experience. Obviously, they're keeping Tavita Pritchard on the offensive side of the ball. And then we'll see who else they wind up adding. One guy that we haven't really talked about yet, I don't know how much there is to say here other than, like, job well done, and this is another great hire for the staff. Larry Izzo's been an incredible special teams coach in the league. So they bring him in to replace Nate Katzer, who was very, very good, and I'm assuming will probably get a job somewhere. But Larry Izzo coming in is definitely a win on the special teams side based off of his resume and the results that he's had in the league. Let's see if we can get a little bit more info on Bobby Johnson and some of these other hires. Nikki Jhabvala, of course, covering the Commanders for the Washington Post. She also covered the 49ers much of last week, so maybe we'll talk a little Super Bowl as well. Nikki joins us next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. And just after 5 o'clock, it is time for Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
Today is time to welcome back to the show our good friend Nikki Jhabvala, who I got to spend a little bit of time with out in Las Vegas. She worked furiously from our table and seemingly everywhere else. Nikki, have you finally caught your breath after a whirlwind week out in Las Vegas?
Yes, sort of, mostly.
That's
I
a
think
no.
I still smell like cigarette and like cigar smoke from all the casinos, but you know.
Yeah, I do wonder, not like, obviously we know a lot more now than we used to about smoking and the harms of nicotine and all of those things. But they had to at least know in 19 whatever it was that those carpets went in, that carpet was really going to absorb that. Like, it is nice to see some of the newer casinos go for some hard flooring, whether it's wood or tile or marble or whatever it is. Like, it's really the carpets that just, you go, why did you guys have to do this, you know?
Yeah, no, exactly.
All right, so
Exactly.
Nikki's with us, of course, from the Washington Post, covering the Commanders, covering the NFL. We might circle back to the Super Bowl if we have time at the end here, but I do want to get some early thoughts on the offensive side of things. You know, Cliff Kingsbury comes in, people have mixed reviews on that, and it seems like that's kind of been everything here on the offensive side of it. Is there one hire in particular on the offensive side of the ball that you really like, or one that you have a lot of questions about? Where are you so far on the staff that they've put together?
I think the one I have the most questions about and kind of baffled by. Hold on, I'm about to tweet something out. They're just they hired Sharif Floyd as their
Yeah. So here, well, I'll let you tweet, and I will tell the audience what you were about to tweet.
Yes.
Other folks getting it, and we apologize that Nikki might not be first on this because she was on the phone with us. But the Commanders are hiring Cowboys assistant Sharif Floyd as their assistant defensive line coach. He, of course, was a standout. I actually remember when he was drafted. God, now I feel terribly old. But I remember when he was drafted, he was big in the Cowboys mix back when I was covering them. But ultimately got drafted by the Vikings, had a pretty solid career, and is now working his way quickly up the ladder in the coaching ranks, and he will reunite with Dan Quinn here in D.C. So that is the latest coaching staff hire. Nikki, have I stalled long enough to give you time to tweet?
Perfect.
Excellent.
Well done. I
All
really
right.
appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. Back to the offensive side.
Yeah. So the one that really kind of baffled me was Bobby Johnson, who's the offensive line coach, was the offensive line coach for the Giants, who gave up a league-high 85 sacks. And it's not necessarily the 85 sacks, because that can be O-line, but it's, blame can be shared there, quarterback, O-line, others. It's more that there didn't seem to be a clear record of growth among their young O-linemen. So that hire's I have questions about it. But, I'm obviously no O-line coaching expert, so I'm guessing there was a compelling reason to want him bring him in even after he was fired from the Giants. So we shall see.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I am. I'm like, I don't know, maybe there's something there to like. I mean, there's obviously the tight ends coach they bring in has worked with Cliff before, but is there any that you have been able to uncover or be told as you report on this, like kind of a common thread amongst these coaches that Cliff is bringing in on the offensive side of the ball?
I don't know that there's a clear thread. I mean, they want clearly I think the thing that I really appreciate after the last 4 years is just having a diverse group of opinion and folks that didn't just all come from a single staff the year prior. I really like bringing in Brian Johnson. His role is still TBD, but, having a voice like him, another person who has helped develop quarterbacks, I think can only be a good thing for this team. Defensively, I think there's more of a connection. I mean, Ken Horton Jr., a well-known name, obviously. He's won 3 titles as a player, another as a coach. And who was the other assistant?
Pagano they brought in.
Both
guys.
were on Jack Del Rio's staff, and in Oakland, which is kind of ironic.
Right.
So here's another one for you. The Commanders are retaining Bobby Ingram as their receivers coach.
That to me is
heard
actually
it here first.
There we go. Nikki breaking news with us
There we
live
go.
here on the air. That one's actually pretty interesting to me because certainly Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin had disappointing seasons last year based off what we thought they could be. And we thought they could definitely easily both be 1,000-yard receivers. And frankly, in training camp, it looked like they were both going to hit that. With how Jahan was playing, for all of the talk, and you and Sam had such a great piece on kind of what went wrong with EB, and maybe in reporting in that piece, does Bobby Ingram's name come up? Like, what did you make of the job that he did last year, and what have you heard about the job that he did?
Yeah, it sounded like he was well liked by players, and like Tavita Pritchard, he had interest from others. So I think that's good that they kept him. I think the other thing to consider with Tavita and Bobby is, they had more years left on their deal, obviously, since they came in last year. So that could have also been, a motivating factor to keep them on staff, especially if they were, well-liked and did well for their group. So, that he had a tough task in sort of adapting to a new receiving corps and a new system with the enemy and kind of helping to put all the pieces together. So, I think, having a little bit of continuity for some of these guys is actually good. So,
yeah, I agree with that. I think the continuity is always like having some level of it to be a translator almost at times can be very good. I did want to ask you about Tavita before the Ingram news it didn't break. You broke it there with us. But you, I know, had some conversations with him and wrote about him in the preseason last year. But as the season went on, like, what did you hear about how he was adapting to the pro game, what he was bringing to the table, and then ultimately why Cliff, by the way, a former quarterback himself, wants to keep him in tow here?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of things to like about Tavita. I think one of the more intriguing ones is he's still somewhat unknown. I think he could be one of the assistants that's on the rise. It's just not fully known yet because I don't think last year was a complete – I don't think it could serve as a complete assessment for any of these guys. Some of them we knew more about going in, but for the new ones, it's not a fully complete assessment. But he does come from, a West Coast system. He's played in it, obviously, at Stanford, coached it. I think the other thing you like is, he called plays at Stanford. He was also like a pseudo coach as a backup when Andrew Luck took his job at Stanford. So he's more than capable of working with these guys. And it seemed like he had a really good rapport with Sam Howell and the others. So whether or not Sam Howell starts or not, he seems like a good one to keep on staff.
Nikki Jhabvala, Washington Post, with us. Of course, read her work at WashingtonPost.com/sports. People want to connect all kinds of dots when it comes to quarterback and every single one of these hires. They hired this guy because it means they want to take quarterback X or keep Sam or do this. Do you think that there is any connectivity towards any of this, or is there just kind of a wide base being built in case they decide to go in any direction? And I guess the second part of that answer would be, how much input do any of these guys have in the number 2 pick versus however else they could possibly fill out that quarterback position?
Yeah, I don't think they wanted Cliff Kingsbury solely to go get Caleb Williams. I think that's a perk if he has a relationship with them and if the team feels like Caleb Williams is the guy and they're considering trading up to try to get him. It helps if that's their motivation, but I don't think that was the reason. This is the guy that Dan Quinn said he had, on his list of coordinators that he would want if he got another head coaching job again. This was before Caleb Williams was Caleb Williams. So, and how much say? I mean, I think there will be some collaboration, but ultimately the GM has the call. This is unlike the last 4 years where the head coach was the de facto GM and had final say over personnel. Now, I think Dan Quinn will be involved, will have input, but the ultimate say will be Adam Peters and, in part, Josh Harris as owner. But, I assuming they run some semblance of a system that Cliff Kingsbury has run in the past, short of that offshoot of the air raid, then you want guys who can fit that and kind of are capable to it of running that. I think only so many coordinators in the league actually truly, like, build a team around players. They all say they do, like, we want to build around this guy. We want to tailor our system to our guys, but most of it, usually it's the opposite. We want to find guys that fit our system, which I've never thought is the greatest strategy, but it's also difficult to do what, like, Baltimore did, So I think that will factor into it as well. And also his system is, this is what Sam Howell ran at Carolina, basically. So you could also argue that, does that mean they're interested in Drake May?
Right.
But I think a lot of the talk of, do these connections mean this at this point in the offseason are just kind of speculative more than anything. Ultimately, sure, those connections may lead there, but as of now, there's no direct correlation.
Yeah, no, I that makes sense to me. It seems like the people who are doing that have the cart and the horse in the wrong order, if you will, where it's like, yeah, that could be helpful, but it's not the reason that they're doing it. Last thing for Nikki Jhabvala, who fresh off covering mostly the 49ers last week out in Las Vegas ahead of Super Bowl 58. I'm always curious, you finally get out of the Commanders bubble, and you do like league level stuff with Maskey so well, unlike the corporate side of the league, if you will, or like the league office type of stuff. But to actually be around another football operation for a week and get out of that Commanders bubble, is there anything you take out of the way that San Francisco does things that you found particularly interesting, or is it too hard to take anything when it's Super Bowl week and everything feels chaotic and different anyway?
Yeah, I mean, this was the fifth time I've done pool reporting, and I enjoy it for that reason. You just kind of get to see something different, and you're the only one that gets to watch practice all week. You can't report on it or use it going forward, but nonetheless, it's pretty cool to be the only person to watch practice during Super Bowl week. So yeah, I think it's always interesting to me to see, how they run practices, how they structure them. There are so many similarities between all the teams in that regard. But to see what certain teams focus on, the level of detail, how much are players moving throughout the workout, is there a lot of wasted time? And also seeing sort of the interactions of coaches and other personnel people that are over there. I think that's where you really see some noticeable difference team to team. And you saw it, with Kyle's team. I'm not allowed to say like a lot of the details of what I saw. I'll just say that Juwan Jennings' play was not a surprise to me. But, the one thing that I think anybody sees when they watch a Kyle Shanahan practice is there's never a wasted second. Guys are always moving. They work on so many different things. Like, in their last walkthrough, which is more of a jog through, it's like they're literally running through every play. And it's quite a bit. And it's, guys are focused. It's different when you watch a team that has gotten to that level because clearly what they're doing has worked and guys have bought in. So it's a different sort of focus and mindset when you watch them. When you're losing, it just takes a toll and everybody's frustrated and you can't wait for it to end. So, but it is an interesting experience. It is fun to kind of see how other teams do things.
Yeah, definitely. It'd be fun to see what habits come. Obviously, DQ was with Kyle. Cliff has his way of doing things. Joe Witt's been with Dan forever, so we'll see. And then again, we thought everything was going to be hunky-dory after seeing EB run a much tighter ship than it had been run the previous 3 years in training camp, and we see how that ended up. So, there's a lot of factors that go into this thing, allegedly. Nikki Jhabvala writing about it all, WashingtonPost.com/sports. Nikki, thank you as always for your time. Good to see you last week, and it sounds like I might see you later this week for some other press conference that may or may not happen that hasn't officially been announced as well.
Yeah, no, I look forward to it.
All right, thanks
for having
Nikki.
me.
Yep, you got it. See ya.
Right.
That is Nikki Jhabvala with us here on the Hoffman Show. Later this week, probably get a coordinator press conference. Kyle was saying on his podcast he thinks it'll be Thursday. John would know better than me. It just would make sense that thing is coming. But we'll see if that ultimately does happen this week. All right, when we get back here on the Hoffman Show, let's react to some of what Nikki just said and get you caught up. Again, literally breaking news during that. So we'll get you all caught up, complete rundown of who's in and who's out in Washington and what they have left to fill on the coaching staff. And then at 5:30, Logan and I talked about some big picture coaching staff stuff on Take Command. We'll share that with you then. on the free Odyssey app. Anthony, have we ever had that happen to us before, where like a reporter breaks news on the show?
I think we've had Ben on before where he had to like cut out short to like go further report on a story. But I don't know if anyone's ever did what Nikki just did.
Yeah, that was pretty special.
Yeah.
Because she was able to tweet out and keep talking at the same time. I will say, I remember on the old afternoon show on The Fan, there was a pretty famous incident where Ian Rappaport was on and got a call and hung up. Not like, he was like, I got to go. And then called back and then hung up a second time. And it did not go over well.
Good. It didn't go over well for you as the host?
I wasn't. No. This was the old afternoon host.
Oh.
On The Fan. Yeah.
Were they angry at?
Yeah. Let's just say it turned into a whole thing. It got written up by awful announcing and everything.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
God dang.
I mean, I get it. I actually understand both sides of that. Because if Nikki was like, hey, I have a huge scoop. I'm really sorry. I have to go. We don't pay her. Her employer does.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, like it'd be different than when I was on the beat. If I was on with at that time it was just 106.7 The Fan. We didn't have 980 in the building yet. But if I was on with Grant and Danny and a story broke, I was in the right place. There's no more valuable place I could be unless it was like, hey, I have to go take a call from a source. I will call you guys back with the information from the source. Like that would have been a good use of my time. But other than that, like I kind of needed to stay on the phone because what more could they want than the person reporting on the story on the show at the time the news is breaking, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So we got lucky on that, and we were able to ask about Bobby Ingram. We were able to ask about Tavita Pritchard. We were able to ask about everybody. So, yeah, thanks to Nikki for not hanging up on us.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been mad because I understand it. But also, like, hey, you committed to coming on with us at 5 o'clock. Is it really going to kill you if you're 10 minutes behind everyone else?
Yeah.
You know, I understand both sides. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like, I wasn't going to be mean to Nikki. I wasn't going to light her up in a way that resulted in us being on awful announcing. But she stuck with it, and we appreciate that. And now we have a more complete coaching staff. I just saw Mark Bullock kind of tweeted out a what's it called? Like a nice summary of kind of where everybody is. So I'm gonna pull that up real quick. So thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Sharif Floyd, actually Sharif Floyd posted on Instagram him in a Washington football shirt. So day one with the Commanders, it's up from here. D-line. So he's going to be the assistant D-line coach, which rounds out a staff on the defensive side that has one giant hole in it, which is who's going to be Sharif Floyd's boss, who will be the defensive line coach. Because you got D coordinator Joe Witt Jr., passing game coordinator, and defensive backs coach Jason Simmons. So I guess they could probably create another DBs if they just give Simmons pass game coordinator. I haven't seen that anywhere else yet. I don't think, but maybe. Anyway, point is, Simmons there. D-line coach open, assistant D-line coach Sharif Floyd, linebackers coach Ken Norton, pass rush specialist Ryan Kerrigan, senior defensive assistant John Pagano. So that leaves D-line coach, which is big. They could obviously add an assistant linebackers coach, and they have quality control coaches they could go up or down the staff with. Then offensively, you've got Cliff Kingsbury, offensive coordinator, pass game coordinator, or senior or special, assistant, whatever Brian Johnson's title is going to be, probably pass game coordinator. Quarterbacks coach Tavita Pritchard, O-line coach Bobby Johnson, tight ends coach David Ray, wide receivers coach Bobby Ingram. And then if you missed it, Randy Jordan left for the Titans. So running backs coach is open, special teams coordinator Larry Izzo. And that also leaves one other position, like big position, open to potentially lure a big name, Anthony. Do you notice what is missing?
Running backs coach? Nope.
Like, yes, but no. It's not what I'm talking about. There's one title that hasn't been given out yet.
Oh, assistant head coach?
That is correct.
I'm good at this, man.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a puzzle game. I wonder... I wonder why. I think one thing you could do is potentially in the future block someone, let's say next year a team wants to hire Brian Johnson as the OC and they want to keep him, right? Say like, hey man, if this offense is good for another year, like Cliff might be gone as a head coach. Like we wanted you to be the OC then. We'll give you assistant head coach title. And you get to stay in your job and we'll pay you like an OC. And then next year you'll be our OC. Like, could that be in play? You always have that, right? To give someone a raise. That's a good title to not. I know. Obviously, it is something that is prestigious and like it's good to have someone who has those duties. But you can give out the duties without the title, and that allows you to potentially sweeten the pot for someone in the future. Even if think about Anthony Weaver, right, in Baltimore. He was the defensive line coach and assistant head coach. So, obviously he's not available. Damn, that would have been nice if you could have gotten him. But whether you're trying to lure a big-name D-line coach or a big-name running backs coach from somewhere and you want to give them that title, or it allows you to eventually, if someone's being lured as a DC somewhere, do you make them think, or an OC somewhere, do you make them think a little bit more about it? It's a way to sweeten the pot in the future. So keeping that title open as long as possible is nice. But it could be that they're working on something somewhere with someone right now that will ultimately get that job, which would be pretty cool to get that hire. All right, when we get back here on the Hoffman Show, Logan and I talked yesterday. Obviously, there's some more names, but we talked more generally about the staff and kind of where it sits right now. You'll hear that conversation from Take Command next on the Team 980. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Coming up at 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock. Really, really looking forward to talking to Josh Robbins of The Athletic, because he had some very interesting reporting about how the Wizards ultimately decided to stay pat, including a proposed trade for Kyle Kuzma that nearly happened at the deadline. Robbins at 6, U.S. men's national team soccer style, Coach Gregg Berhalter at 6:30. Right now, though, a little take command action for you. Logan and I spent some time on the most recent podcast talking about the Commanders coaching staff. We did record this yesterday, so obviously there's been some more names added, but we talked more big picture about how these two sides of the ball are coming together, and those thoughts are still very much true. So without further ado, Logan and your boy on Take Command. Wrapping up here, our final 10, 15 minutes or so on Take Command. I don't know how much longer it's going to be, Logan, because we haven't done this yet. That's how time works.
Exciting.
We don't know. We're not on a clock. We're not in overtime for the fourth quarter. I guess we kind of are in overtime in a way. We don't know how much time is left. By the way, speaking of the rules thing, that was a question I did have. I knew the new rules, but as that we got near the end of the first overtime, I did not know in whether or not it was like that was the end of the first quarter, or like, hey, does Kansas City need to score before time expired?
What I thought. Yeah, I was like, did they need to score a touchdown right here? Like, what's happening?
Do they need to get going? Like, what's going on?
It was really weird to watch, yeah.
Yeah, so luckily Gene Steratore on the broadcast did say, like, no, this is the first quarter, because otherwise I guess you would have had a 2-minute warning. So that makes sense as well. But there you go. We learned something, even if some of us learned more than others. Okay, Commanders have made a couple of hires since we last met, including one this morning. Bobby Johnson, now the offensive line coach for Cliff Kingsbury and Dan Quinn. Last couple of years, he's been a Giants line coach. I don't think the job he did in New York is why he's getting this job, because it has not been a pretty couple of years for the Giants offensive line. But he's had some other good results, good stops. And, I think there's also a tape study to be done here that I know we haven't had the chance to do yet, where we go, okay, is this well designed and poorly executed, or do we have real questions about the hire that just got made?
Yeah, and I will say this though, like to Bobby's maybe credit, and I've got to watch more film, obviously, of what's happening here. But just thinking back, like they do a good job of like marrying run and pass concepts together from a formation standpoint. That's the offensive line coach. Obviously, they're coaching technical elements, but there's a huge tactical element to that job in terms of what runs do we like. What are our best protections? I think from a run game standpoint, you see some good stuff. You see guys that are well coached. Obviously, Saquon Barkley had some explosive runs over his time in New York that we're very familiar with here in Washington. So I just want to put that out. Like, I know that hire seems like, oh no, that's tough. Like, what's happening? But there are more layers to what that position does. And I also want to say, like, he's had a front row seat to see how to insulate an offensive line. I think New York, because they have a bad one, does a really good job of like calling plays, designing a game plan around insulating that group. So I think having that level of experience could potentially be very helpful. So don't look at this as like on the surface and go like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. There are many layers to this position, and hopefully like he's really good at these other elements, and hopefully like maybe he just didn't have the right group of 5 guys up there in New York, and this is the right one for him. So
yeah, and so we'll do some more tape study and dive into this deeper probably next week. But I will also say, like, on the resume, even these last couple of years, like Andrew Thomas was a second team All-Pro 2 years ago. So like young player development got a pretty good notch in his belt on that one. So we'll see. I think to me the bigger concern, and again, this is a concern. This is not a death sentence. This is me expressing out loud
just
thoughts.
Being honest, man. Just being honest. Right? We're just talking through some stuff.
We're just talking. Just a couple of guys talking.
The sky's not falling yet. We're just talking stuff.
No, it's February. This guy can't fall. Not at least until September. But I think that the concern that I have is exactly mirrored in excitement on the other side of the ball. So on defense, Dan Quinn has hired Joe Witt. Joe Witt's hired some folks, Jason Simmons, who they've all worked together before. They come from a school of thought. They have personal and professional familiarity, and that's exciting to me. Like, let's get not in the way that Ron Rivera did, where it's like, let's just get the gang that didn't work get back together. Like the guys that have worked together in successful situations. Let's get the continuity of success, right? As opposed to what happened. The ultimate bad example, I've used this times on this show and the radio show is like what happened in Carolina. I think Frank Reich and Thomas Brown and all those guys that got there. There's a lot of good coaches that were offensively in the room last year for Carolina. They hadn't worked together before, and they didn't work together last year. That was a bad group.
Yeah.
And so I see Cliff hire, keeps Tavita Pritchard.
Yeah.
Tavita was pretty well reviewed, seemed to be very sought after, seems to be a good coach. Obviously, I think there's some questions about what happened last year, but how much of that was Bieniemy, how much of that was Tavita, how much of that was other people, whatever. Yeah. Tavita seems to be a good coach. I think Cliff offensively is a good coach. Bobby Johnson, O-line, but it's a bunch of guys that
got to come together.
Johnson, they got to come together, and I think that can be done. And I think there are some similarities in how these coaches have coached in some various places. But I think one of the reasons that the offense did not go as well as Bieniemy wanted last year was a lack of cohesiveness on staff. Now, he didn't get to pick any of those guys. Cliff at least is picking these guys, but it is something that has to happen. I'll put it that way.
No, I 100% agree. And I think because it's like any kind of professional environment, right? You want to be friends or have a functioning working relationship with your coworkers, right? Like if we didn't like each other, this podcast wouldn't be very good, right? Because we wouldn't be able to talk through some stuff. And I think that's what you're looking at here. It's like you're getting guys together that I think that have good resumes in their own right. But it's like, how do they come together? How do they gel? Much in the same way when you bring in players to a new locker room, like how do they gel? If you bring the wrong piece in, it doesn't work. So I think you bring up a great point about the defense. I think there's a lot to be excited about there, specifically in the back end. I'm really excited for the secondary. I think all of their experience, all of their kind of key data points along the resume is fantastic. But like you said, offensively, they've got some stuff that they got to talk through, and they got to work through. And we won't have any kind of definitive information on that until we get later in the process. So.
Yeah, and I know you guys are talking to Cliff, hopefully
tomorrow or Wednesday. We'll see. Yep.
Yeah, so Command Center should have a good interview. I would also recommend a couple of years ago during the pandemic, I might have mentioned this on the last show, but a couple of years ago during the pandemic, Sean McVay, I guess, was bored. So he and Peter Schrager did a podcast. And so Cliff was a guest on that podcast. And I thought there was some interesting stuff in that pod about for Cliff, talking about how it was a struggle at times to find the time to be in command of the offense, because you have to be the head coach first. Like you have to kind of mix and match your time. And he gets in at 4 a.m. and watches the tape, and it's the only time he can kind of get to himself. And he better be done by 7, because then he's got to get ready for the team meeting at 8. That's just the reality. And so now him as an OC, and it's kind of funny too, seeing some of the stuff that went around. Like even last night after Mahomes wins, there was this great list of Mahomes and his losses at Texas Tech under Cliff. And the stats are insane. Like he averaged in his losses 389 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Wow.
Average.
That's incredible. Yeah.
Average. And it's like, well, it seems to me like the defense was the problem. So maybe this Cliff only has to coach the offense thing might actually work out. But I do think, again, like the cohesiveness between Brian Johnson, Tavita Pritchard, and like making sure everyone is clear on their roles. I'm curious, like in your experience, have you been a part of staffs where there wasn't that cohesion? And then obviously, like I think most famously, that 2012 staff was very on the same page, or at least by the time the information got to you guys as a team was on the same page.
Yeah, I think, every staff that I've been a part of, especially when it's not going well, like one that sticks out to me is like Chicago, like just guys that had kind of come from different areas, different backgrounds, different coaching trees. They all had, they're all very smart guys, but they're all like, this is the way we're going to solve this problem. And that just didn't jive, just didn't lead to a productive offense. And I think, we had a young offensive coordinator at the time. Dal Loggins, a guy who I think is really smart. He's now the OC for South Carolina. So good job, Dal, back in the saddle. But young guy and some older coaches underneath him that had a very strong perspective, a couple that were kind of on the way out, just kind of wrangling all those cats. I think, like you said, like you talked about the film element of being an offensive coordinator. I think there's a leadership element there too. Like this is the direction we want to go. And I think about Sean, I think about Kyle, in both San Francisco here. And then when Sean obviously was the OC, and then even when I was in Houston and like Bill O'Brien's the head coach and there's the OC, like there was a very clear vision for everybody. Right. And I think that's kind of what that offensive coordinator position needs to encapsulate. And hopefully Cliff, because he's got the more time now, can kind of get that done and get everybody on the same page. And, this is part of building the staff, right? And I think you hire these guys because you've got pre-existing relations with them and you believe in what they do. And I think ultimately, like, we'll have to see what happens, but that's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, Johnson's the one that's interesting to me, like, because if you're keeping Pritchard, Johnson was a QB coach, then he was an OC in Philly, and he's got so much experience coaching quarterbacks. Like he was with Dak. Obviously, he's been with Jalen. He's known Jalen since Jalen was 6 years old.
Oh, wow.
Because Brian, when he was a high school player, was coached by Jalen's dad before going to Utah and having a pretty good career as a player there. So, like, what is his role? Like, what is his position? Like, what is his versus what is Tavita's? Obviously, Cliff is a former quarterback. Like, how involved is he there and whoever this young guy is? And just as long as there aren't too many cooks in the kitchen, I think it can work. One thing that I do appreciate is this seems to be a pretty young staff. Maybe Bobby Johnson's definitely a little bit older than the rest of these guys. He's been coaching for 14 years. He's the O-line coach, but that is something that I have seen before. When Kevin was the OC and Bill Callahan was on staff, like, they butted heads because Bill thought he knew better at all times. And at times he may have been right. But Kevin was ultimately the OC, and obviously Jay was the head coach. And then all of a sudden Bill was the head coach in that final year in 2019. And that was not always pretty all the time. So that is a dynamic both in professional, one thing that I like about Brian Johnson coming with Cliff is, like, Brian's played in a lot of he's a guy that uses a lot of spread stuff.
Yeah.
So, like, similar personnel groupings, but maybe some different ideas of how to deploy them. Like, that could be really exciting.
Yeah.
But how do they get along, like, personally, professionally, if you will? Not do they go hang out and have dinner, but, like, how do they interact as human beings in the building? How do they respect each other? How is that information and those relationships presented to the players? And that's the same as in any corporate structure, but that stuff becomes obviously really important. And I think on the defensive side, because the familiarity, you're not going to have to worry about any of that stuff.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think the other thing, you mentioned, like, who gets what responsibilities when it comes to Tavita, Ben Johnson, and Brian Johnson, excuse me, and then Cliff. I think, one thing that you're seeing more and more with offensive staffs is you're seeing a run game coordinator and you're seeing a pass game coordinator. And that's just because, and I think you bring in that guy like Brian Johnson because he's got that ability to do that for you, right? And it just helps streamline the process a little bit. Kyle had a run game coordinator a long time for San Fran. I think Sean had a pass game guy. I think it might have been O'Connell when he was there. It's a valuable tool. So just getting guys who know offense, who've got that background, is extremely important. And I think, we'll see how it all settles in, like you said, but I don't think it's not a reason to be alarmed that there's these guys with kind of similar skill sets. Cause I think as long as you give them clearly defined roles and give them responsibilities, I think you want guys that are smart, that see things see things in a similar way and can come to easy solutions.
No doubt. All right. So I would say the Thursday show. I think it'll be the Thursday show, later in the week show, whatever show's the next one. We will reflect. Logan, maybe give us some insight on the interviews with Cliff and Joe Witt, assuming that you guys get those guys on Command Center, get a chance to talk to them. But I do think the bulk of that episode will be a mock draft. We promise you mock draft 1.0. So Take Command mock draft 1.0. Let's see where we are before we head into the combine in a couple of weeks. So plenty of draft coverage between now and the end of, the end of draft season, the draft. Also, free agency primer needs to happen soon because free agency at this point is now like 3 weeks away, which is nuts. If you like this episode and you're not subscribed yet, do that. Subscribe wherever it is you're watching or listening right now, and we will see you later in the week for a mock draft. Yup, it's time on Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good, and then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 1067 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do it.
Very, very smart. Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980, where I apologize to the folks who we had some double audio situation on the commercial breaks, Anthony, and it was apparently very loud, but we fixed it. I just didn't have the comments. Sometimes I have the stream. I need to be better about that. Every day, making sure the stream is up and make sure that we're good monitoring that. And I wasn't today. And then I saw the comments. And I was like, I know what happened. Let me fix it. And so we fixed it. We're a rapid response show around here.
We are a solutions-oriented show around here.
That's what Damon Amendolara said.
Yes.
And he was on with us.
Yes.
It was good to see DA, although my guy, I don't know why the hell he went to Las Vegas. Think about it. What time's his show on?
Because it was at like 3 a.m. over there.
Yeah. He's a 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern show.
Yeah.
There ain't nobody. Now, he did get some good stuff on tape, including, by the way, you want to know who he had on? I think I told you this off air. He had Zaire on.
Oh, yeah. He said it was like one of his better interviews. Him and Troy Polamalu.
Yes. Yeah. He was out there for that, which is a good time. But I will say this, if we ever, one, I'm never doing mornings. The only way I'm doing mornings is if I have a young child. There will be a small window where I'm up that early anyway, and I'm like, you want to know what? Screw it. I'm going to do a morning show.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing mornings. If the junkies decide to retire and CK is like, we want you to take over the mornings, I'll be like, nope, I'm good.
Are you not a morning person, or?
I am a morning person. Not that early.
What about like 9 a.m.?
Yeah, like I could do the old slot that you had with Travis.
Just not 6.
No, 6 to 10 a.m.? No thanks. I did
I'm not going to lie. So when we had moved over and I had to produce for Kevin, man, I was up at like 4.
Yeah.
Up at 4, driving cross town, down here, having to grab audio. Oh, my gosh.
Especially, this is,
I salute to Denton because he has to do that every day.
Well, I mean, they're now at 10 a.m.
Oh, well, he used to, yeah.
Right, because we got the Junkie simulcast in the morning now. So it's just Drab and Valdez and those guys who have to get up. But I'm almost done with it finally because I feel like I've been saying this for months because I have. But, like, this book on sleep that I've been reading, like, there's not – I must not say there's no amount of money, but there's no amount of money that our company has that you could pay me to miss sleep. After reading the effects of what happens to your body when you deprive it, especially of late mornings, like you get what's called REM sleep.
Yep. Rapid
eye movement. But it's like where kind of a lot of your creativity comes from. A lot of memories get locked in. It's really important for your emotional and physical well-being. Like, I mean, all your sleep is, but REM sleep in particular is very, very important. Like, you deprive people of REM sleep in a major way, in like 3 days, they turn psychotic. I mean that in like a clinical sense. Like, you'll start hallucinating. They've done experiments and are like, we don't do those experiments anymore because we deprive people of REM sleep for multiple days in a row, and all of a sudden they were seeing things. So I am not sacrificing my late morning sleep I will do it for my child when if we have children one day and they're on messed up sleep patterns because they're children and that's what happens. Outside of that, no thanks. Also, it's so stupid that we start high school at like, I don't know what time high school starts around here, but like if you're starting high school before 9 a.m., you are killing your kids. Sometimes literally.
Yeah, I mean, I went to school and started school before 9 a.m. 8:15 on the dot.
8:15 is more acceptable. But like high school, when you're in your teenage years, like the idea that teenagers sleep in is like actually a real thing. Your circadian rhythm when you're a teenager is shifted later. You go to bed later, like your natural one. And so there's been all these studies about both efficacy in school, test scores, things like that, where they measure SATs and like they have an average of like, okay, it's been this. And then we shift school start times back and SAT scores jump like 200 points on average.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. And then also we talk about like literally killing our kids, like the number of traffic accidents when you shift school back it's like a 60% decrease for traffic accidents for like teenagers that can drive.
Oh.
Yeah. So if there's anyone listening from any of the local school boards, and we're starting school anywhere, I don't know because I don't have high schoolers. I don't interact with high schoolers very often, just the way my life is designed. Not like I intentionally kick them out. I used to all the time because I used to train a bunch of high school kids. But I just don't anymore. Anyway, the point is, if anyone's starting school, certainly before 8, like if you got a 7:30 start time for a high school class, high school situation, that's terrible. Don't do that. It's bad for your kids.
Yeah. That's
what time does prep start?
We start at 8:15.
8:15? That's acceptable. But also, like, your kids live on campus.
Not all of them.
Oh.
Some people also, like, so when I was in high school, I had a friend that lived in Loudoun, and there was a bus that goes from Loudoun to prep, and we had to get on the bus at 6 a.m.
No,
we had to get on the bus.
Unless you fall back to sleep on the bus and can sleep.
Oh, yeah, I was definitely going to sleep for an hour. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's better to recoup some of that sleep, but still, definitely not good.
Yeah.
Definitely not good. Got to get the creativity, the creative juices flowing. Happens during REM sleep, late morning. Read up on sleep, kids and adults. It's good for you. Anyway, Josh Robbins, he's got lots of information. I think he probably doesn't sleep great all the time because he covers the NBA, and they're on some funky schedules. You want to know some dudes that got some funky sleep schedules? NBA players. Good gracious. Anyway, Josh has great information on what the Wizards did and why they decided to stand pat, including a proposed trade that was on the table that the Wizards didn't hate for Kyle Kuzma. You'll hear about that from Josh. And I want to talk to him about Jordan Poole, too, and kind of what happens now that we're past the trade deadline with JP next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app and, of course, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. And it's our pleasure to welcome in our friend Josh Robbins from The Athletic, tremendous beat reporter covering the Wizards. Always great to read his writing, and good to have him on the show to talk about it, especially, Josh, when you drop nuggets like you did earlier this week. Kyle Kuzma, there was a trade on the table for him with the Mavericks, and you reported that basically Michael Winger went to him and asked, like, hey, Kyle, do you want this? Kyle says no, and you had a conversation with Kyle about this on, I believe it was Monday, and thus they walked away from the trade. Can you tell us a little bit more about how this went down and some of the details? Because I think, especially for Wizards fans who just went through the Bradley Beal years of a no-trade clause, that does sound a little bit disconcerting if you're looking at players as commodities, which often happens this time of year.
I think you described a lot of it very, very well. When Kuzma re-signed with the Wizards, it was clear that the Wizards had started to rebuild. They traded Beal. They had to trade Porzingis because Porzingis wasn't going to re-sign with them. And so the Wizards felt to a large degree that Kuzma was putting his faith in them. And of course, everyone involved is mature enough and experienced enough to know that he automatically was going to become a legitimate trade candidate beginning in mid-December, and will continue to be that for the next 3.5 years. So at that time, Michael Winger made Kuzma and Kuzma's agent a promise that he'll keep them informed and would at least like to hear Kuzma's voice when a trade framework was developed, to at least offer him some input. Doesn't mean that Kuzma makes the decisions, doesn't mean that Kuzma has a no-trade clause. And here was a case where the Wizards negotiated what they could negotiate with the Dallas Mavericks. It was the best offer for Kuzma on the table, and it was an offer that wasn't going to materially change Washington's rebuild. In other words, put it another way, Winger was very lukewarm about it. It was a fair deal, not a home run deal for the Wizards. And he went to Kuzma, and Kuzma thought it over, responded, hey, I'd like to stay here if that's okay with you. And that's what happened. Winger calls Nico Harris and says, hey, I respect you in these talks, but I just can't do the deal. This leaves open the possibility that the Wizards will trade Kuzma down the line, potentially for a better return. And I think that's a very real possibility down the line. But in this case, from now until the draft, there's no question that Kuzma is going to remain in Washington.
So I think there's so much interesting about this, and I'm glad that you are able to explain to the audience. I think you did a good job of the piece as well, of like, if they had gotten 2-3 first-round picks all of a sudden, like some ridiculous deal on the table, Michael Winger was going to make that deal, and Kyle Kuzma and his agent certainly understood that. But when you, like, do you have any sense of what this deal might have been, even trying to put together context clues about maybe what Dallas traded for PJ Washington? And then what kind of deal do you think that they could get for him this summer if teams are pursuing Kyle again?
I don't think the Wizards were able to get 2 first-round picks for Kuz in this cycle. There's nothing to indicate that they did. And as a matter of fact, it was buzzing throughout the entire league that it was 2 first-round picks that was the price the Wizards had. I think my sense, and this is a guess, that it was going to be 1 incoming pick, and keep in mind it was going to come from either Dallas or a pick that Dallas could have purchased, and probably not a high-level young player, probably not a high-level young talent. So that's why the Wizards were lukewarm about what they were able to negotiate for Kuz. One thing to remember, and this is my reporting, this is not what the Wizards have told me, yet as good as Kyle has been for the Wizards in many ways, he's not viewed as a number 1 or number 2 option throughout the league on a very good team. So it's not like other teams are beating down the door for the Wizards with multiple first-round picks at this time. Now, maybe that could change if a team or two out there goes through the playoffs, gets eliminated early, and feels like it needs a major jolt. For now, though, my reporting is that the value Kuz has isn't what Wizards fans would hope Kuz has.
So I think as Josh Robbins from The Athletic is our guest, one of the big things that I have certainly been talking about is that this is a gigantic game of chess for Winger and Dawkins, not checkers. They are trying to think 2-3 moves down the line, and thus just making a move right now for the sake of making one is not really what they want. But are you surprised even with that framing that there wasn't more movement, that it was really just Daniel Gafford and obviously the incoming trade for Bagley that ultimately happens when they have guys like Tyus Jones on the expiring contracts?
Yes, very much so at that time. I expected the Wizards to move Kuz. I thought that was a very real possibility. I expected, and here comes the trash can in the lobby of this Marriott here in Dallas. I hope you can't hear that. I expected them to move Kuz. I think the vast majority of rival executives expected them to move Tyus Jones. They expected Delon Wright to go. As you said, they were not there. So I was expecting more. With regarding Tyus Jones, reading between the lines, I would expect now Tyus Jones to re-sign with Washington in the offseason. That's my guess. And David Aldridge and I reported about a week before the trade deadline that the Wizards had real interest in re-signing him and making him their starting point guard for the foreseeable future. And I think that is what's going to come to pass.
I would say, Josh, that the guy that really surprises me that he's still on the roster is DeLon, because he is a veteran. He is one of the best perimeter defenders in the league, and he is not probably a part of the future in the way that a guy like Tyus could be. Like, having Tyus around young players and to keep things organized is a tremendous asset in a rebuild that is built on building good habits. Not that DeLon isn't a good player and a useful player, but precisely because he is in a different setting, he's the guy that I think really surprised me. So I guess that's a long-winded wind-up to say, like, is that maybe us in DC overestimating him and what he brings to a team, or is that maybe just the market in general didn't have as much movement this time around as it has in other years?
I think that was almost as big of a surprise as Tyus Jones staying. Two things to remember. First, DeLon Wright will be an unrestricted free agent this offseason. Will he even be interested in re-signing with the Wizards? If not, then you hate to use this. It's bad management from a roster perspective. However, DeLon missed half the season with a knee injury. I suspect that other teams question whether he was all the way back healthy, which may have limited his value. He was never going to get a first-round pick, even for a healthy DeLon Wright. It was most likely going to be a second-round pick, almost certainly from a contender, meaning that if it was their own second-round pick, it would be late in the second round. And it didn't appear that deal was on the table. And to look at it another way, the Wizards almost certainly would have had to bring in salary in that deal. And doing that would have eliminated their ability to use some of their trade exceptions they had before mid-July. That's something that they value, that maybe they could take on a salary so long as it nets them a valuable pick as the cost of doing business. So they also didn't want to intrude on the, as they would say, the utility of those traded player exceptions.
Josh Robbins of The Athletic, their Wizards beat reporter, is with us. So kind of now switching gears from the trade deadline and the things that did and didn't happen to what happens next. One of the big questions I have is, does this season of experimentation now begin in earnest? Because about the trade values of all of these players. What are some of the things that you expect to see Brian Keefe, maybe at the encouragement, the nudging of management, or just on his own as a guy who's got a great history developing players? Now, of course, for those that don't remember, Brian Keefe, the Wizards interim head coach. What are some of the things that maybe you anticipate Brian Keefe experimenting with over these final few months of the season?
Well, there's no question Bilal will continue to play heavy minutes. You know, he is playing heavy minutes. I know fans want him to start regularly. He is playing heavy minutes. Is there a likelihood that he moves into the starting lineup before the end of the season? That would not surprise me. I don't think that that's a done deal yet. I expect him to be on the floor finishing close games. I still think Marvin Bagley is going to start at center for the majority of the remaining games. I think Bagley's someone who's only 24. He too can maybe be developed. Maybe there's something there that his prior teams haven't unearthed. I'm skeptical that Johnny Davis would receive major minutes or a rotation role unless we're talking about their last 5, 6, 7, 8 games of the season and the Wizards trying to rest and not risk some of their veteran guys. There will be some experimentation, but for guys such as Denny, Bilal, Kispert, the younger guy, the majority of their younger guys, they are playing heavy minutes and they are being played down the stretches of big games.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Brian Keefe, since he took over, Bilal third on the team in minutes, so he is definitely playing more than I think the reputation says, because he's still not starting. Obviously, the two guys that I think are most interesting outside of Bilal for very different reasons are one guy you just mentioned in Johnny Davis and Jordan Poole. We'll circle back to JP in a second, but quickly just to follow up on Johnny, like, do we just kind of chalk that up as a miss at this point? Is he? I hate to put the word bust on a guy, especially for someone who's gone through a lot of the stuff that Johnny has gone through and had to deal with injuries and transitioning as a young man into professional life. But realistically, when you look at him as a player, is that just kind of, do we chalk that up as a miss at this point? Or is there a salvageable, at least rotation player version of Johnny Davis somewhere still waiting on the horizon?
Maybe, but all the evidence appears to indicate that he isn't right now. But right now, that's what the evidence is. In retrospect, with the benefit of hindsight, it looks to me, and an increasing number of player personnel evaluators throughout the league, that he's not an NBA rotation player. That a lot of the great and he was a great college player at in a legit conference, that he came from a very structured, regimented offense at Wisconsin, where so much of his offense were mid-range shots, which is exactly the opposite of the direction the NBA is going. The NBA being, of course, a league where creativity and pure evasiveness and skill and athleticism and size is so important. So I'm not optimistic there. Maybe he will get his chance, but I don't see it in the very near future.
Yeah, I felt like at the end of last year he showed some flashes, especially defensively, but just hasn't come together. And this new staff certainly would have given him the chance. That leads us then to Jordan. And it just has been as disastrous of a season as I can remember for a guy who has the potential, or at least was seen to have the potential of being a star player. What are the Wizards saying about Jordan Poole, and what is, when you talk to other folks around the league, what are they saying about Jordan Poole and how this next 3 months until the summer at the very least goes down?
Well, the Wizards are saying all the right things. Brian Keefe 2 games ago reiterated how much he trusts Jordan Poole. Well, last night, Jordan Poole wasn't in there down the stretch when they were they had some points to make up. They went with Kispert in part because of Kispert's three-point shooting. You're right. It's been close to disastrous from an on-court perspective, not an off-court perspective, not in terms of his maturity or being a good teammate, but on the court, it's just very difficult to envision him the way he's played as a starting two guard on a contending team. He just hasn't played well enough to do that, and he doesn't have a lot of size. He's not a great athlete, does not defend, although his defense has improved, his effort has improved under Brian Keefe. I would just, instead of saying not encouraging signs, I would say discouraging signs. And he's got a big contract. He's got 3 more years on that contract. It's a problem. It's a problem. And I suspect the Wizards are going to do everything they can to resurrect his game and his value. But given the lack of other big-time offensive threats to make things easier on Jordan, other opponents are going to put him right at the top of that scouting report. And in many cases, he's most likely going to struggle.
Do you think that they finally move him to the bench, and whether it's Corey, whether it's Bilal, whether it's whoever, that they maybe they take a different look at that backcourt with Tyus as the starter, get some extra size in there, maybe get some shooting that Jordan was theoretically going to provide but hasn't? Like, is that change, do you think, coming, or do they just roll with this for the rest of the year and maybe adjust the minutes outside of when the game hasn't started yet?
Well, now that's another great question. And I wish I had the exact answer to that. My guess, emphasis on the word guess, is that they continue down this path, where they have 29 more games. I suspect that they go down this path, continuing like this, probably for the next 18, 19, 20 games. And then perhaps switch things up. If he continues to shoot 1 for 12 from the field, as he was last night, I believe, or go 0 for 5 from the field as he was against Cleveland, well, that may force Brian Keefe's hand. I don't think that things will remain quite that bad. So here I'm giving you a mealy-mouthed answer because I don't know the answer. I suspect that if that change occurs, it would probably be much later in the season, probably 9-10 games to go.
No, I think that's totally fair. And the one thing that I've learned very quickly, as I'm sure you have as well, far more intensely than I have, is this is a fairly tight-lipped group, that they are together in their messaging, and everything coming out of there is that all the same positive stuff that you said about Jordan in terms of how he is. And this is where I'll wrap with you, Josh. And the last thing on JP is, in some ways, does it make it harder that he's been such a good teammate and that mentally he seems locked in and all those things? It's not like, man, this guy seems lost. Like, you don't hear that. It is just the game. The game, it does not seem to be going well. And it feels like in some ways that makes it harder. I'm obviously not there as much as you are and having the conversations that you are. I'm curious your thoughts on kind of that almost separation of, like, yes, teammate, mentally, all that stuff, check, and the game has just not come along.
Yes, it certainly does. It's a good thing for the Wizards that he's been fine off the court. He gets this you shouldn't almost have to make that qualifier, but he had such a bad reputation from something where he got a terrible raw deal, which is that doctored video of that timeout in Brooklyn. I've watched that original footage. That original footage aired on the Wizards network during the game,
right?
In which he was actually looking at that whiteboard for 18 consecutive seconds. Now, if that video that was circulated on Twitter was accurate, well, then that would have been a damning moment. But it was inauthentic. You're right. If he were a bad teammate, this would be a much more cut and dried case. But he hasn't been that. And there have been instances where actually in games where he's been a little too unselfish. So exactly as you said, I would just say he just hasn't been good enough on the court, and that seems to indicate for now that he's most likely best suited to being a bench player on a good team, which is not what the Wizards would want or any fan base would want. They would want him to just, of course, the polar opposite to be true, but there have been very few indications that that's going to happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this is a guy that I thought before the season could lead the league in scoring if he could get his shot going and the attempts he would get. And here we are having this conversation now. It's kind of bizarre, but that's the league sometimes, as you well know. Josh Robbins writing about it all in The Athletic. Josh, thanks so much for your time. Greatly appreciate it. Safe travels, and we will talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Craig. Take care.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We have, I know sometimes we have like really cool, funny stuff and real things. We have some awesome stuff and real things, including Andy Reid breaking down the play call of the game-winning play in the Super Bowl. It involves Tom and Jerry. It involves, there's a cool motion, cool formation and personnel grouping. Like, if you are interested in like football lingo, very cool soundbite. And also my favorite referee mic'd up soundbite ever coming up in Real Things at the quarter hour mark, or I guess the quarter till mark, just over 15 minutes from right now. Big announcement though today in the DMV for the first time since 2019 overall, for the first time at FedEx Field since 2012, the U.S. men's national team is coming to town. Yeah, the U.S. men's national soccer team has played in D.C. more than any other city in its history, but it has not played at FedEx Field, the region's biggest venue, since 2012. We already know that, unfortunately, D.C. got shut out of the World Cup, also got shut out of Copa America this summer. However, Gregg Berhalter and his team are going to play at FedEx on June 8th. Very, very good opponent, Colombia, one of the best teams in this side of the Atlantic Ocean. Right now. Colombia, fantastic opponent to get ready for Copa America this summer. So that friendly is on Saturday, June 8th. I went to the announcement earlier today, press conference with Berhalter and a couple of folks from the Harris Blitzer group, obviously Josh Harris, Commanders owner, and his group, as well as a representative from the Commanders fan experience themselves. They had a press conference. And then I got the chance to sit down with Berhalter and talk a little soccer. So here is my chat with U.S. men's national team coach Gregg Berhalter. With U.S. soccer coach Gregg Berhalter here in D.C. Exciting announcement today, obviously. I just want to kind of get into the meat of some of the stuff I want to talk to you about, though, in terms of the coaching side of it. You're now going through this as a second time, kind of, and everyone is, you've talked at length before, various interviews about the difference between coaching club and country. What is the difference for you, though, going in the second time around as a national team coach and some of the things you learned in that first 4 years?
You know, I think the important thing is to be focused on getting better. We feel like we did a lot of good things in the first term. But now it's about how do you get better, not being complacent, really trying to take the group from one level to the next. And, and that's the key to me is that, whatever you did in the past, you evaluate it, but the whole intention is to improve.
Right, but like what are the things that you learn? You talk about the differences between club and country. Like, what are the things you learned in that first 4 years that you apply to then accomplish that goal of getting better?
You know, it's interesting because I think the experience alone, particularly for the players participating in a World Cup, it gives you the comfort that going into this next World Cup, they understand what it's like. They understand how difficult the games are. They understand the difference between winning and losing and potentially what it takes to win these games. World Cup games, particularly the knockout games, are very challenging. Very little separates the teams, and it's about being tuned in for every moment during the game to get the result that you need.
I want to ask you tangentially about, I'm sure, what is one of your least favorite topics in terms of what happened with Gio and the last World Cup. You've talked about that specifically before, but I think one of the things that's interesting from like a mass, we're obviously a sports talk radio show is the audience this will go to as opposed to the hardcore locked-in soccer fan. But the idea that, you're representing the country, and with that comes some level of transparency as a national team coach. You're also a coach trying to protect your team. And so as you navigated that situation and any other situation that might arise, how do you balance the need to be transparent and like, yes, we are representing you, the crest, the country, versus protecting your team and kind of that locker room?
Well, I think it starts with your group. It starts with, the trust that you have between the group and the players. And you work hard over the course of 4 years to build that trust. And I think that's, when you have teammates that can look each other in the eye and they know that they're gonna lay everything on the line for the person next to them, then you're in a really good spot. And so when we move into this next 2.5 year period, that's where the team needs to get to again. You could be at a certain place in the last World Cup, and now it's about how do you get back to that for 2026.
So when you, specific to my question though, in terms of, talking about the dynamics of what's going on within a team, who's, kind of the stock up, stock down, do you feel a different level of necessity to share with the press and thus the fans? We're just the conduit compared to, say, when you were at Columbus with the crew and kind of that more private club environment?
Well, I think there's certainly more attention on the national team when the national team plays because we don't play that often, and when we do, it's big news. There's a lot of attention around our players. A lot of our players are very high-profile players, and the policy that we have in general has always been to be more transparent than less transparent. For us, it's not about coveting information or holding secrets. It's very simple. We want to create a team that works well together. We want to create a team that works for each other and a team that understands what they're doing on the field.
Yeah, I know it's tough, so I appreciate your answer to that question. More on the pitch now. When you think about what it means to develop a style and to build a team for American soccer, now that the player pool is so diverse in terms of not just where they come from, but where they're playing, has that become harder, do you think, than compared to when you were playing or even 4 years ago to try to really identify the style and the tactics that are best for this group?
No, I think it's easier because when you look at it in general, our top players are all playing at very high levels. And, they're playing in Champions League games and they're playing at the absolute pinnacle of the sport. And when you have players like that, it means they're easily...
So you're saying having good players is good for a coach.
Exactly. It helps a coach for sure. But I think, but more specifically, I think it helps with the flexibility of the players. They're used to having to, play different formations, and they're used to being coached at a high level. And I think that's helpful. When you see, for example, the example I'll give you is Christian Pulisic. You see the managers that he's worked with over the last 5 years. Some of the top managers in the game, and with each one of them, they play different styles, and he's have to adapt, for as he's gone.
How hard is it for you to evaluate, whether it's for a Copa America or ultimately a World Cup, if a guy is playing one position, one role at a club team versus what you maybe envision for them at the national
That's
team?
the challenge. I think the biggest challenge is when they're doing something completely different than you're going to be asking them to do. And it happens, though. And again, we have to be adaptable. We have to fit into, we have to work around our best players because that number is limited. It's not like a club team where you can just get another guy.
Right.
And so we're looking at our guys all the time. We're seeing their skill sets, and we're adapting, and we're trying to fit them in the best way possible.
And then last but not least, that number 9 position has been a struggle for a while now at the U.S. level, but there is an incredible influx of young talent. How do you see that position stacking up going into this summer?
I think we've improved in that position for sure. We want to keep going. We want to keep supporting our guys, whether that's Ricardo or Ballo or Josh Sargent or Haji Wright or, there's a ton of guys that have been out there doing well in the striker position, and we want to just keep supporting them. Jordan Sabachu's another one. So we have guys out there, and now it's just about seeing how they fit into what we do.
Gregg Berhalter, thanks so much. Appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
What's up, kiddos? It's your boy Clinton Yates from ESPN. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 9.
Again, the announcement earlier today from U.S. Soccer that they will be playing at FedEx Field for the first time since 2012. June 8th is that game. I thought it was also interesting. I was catching up with a Commanders official because this is a pretty significant thing that is happening for U.S. Soccer to finally be like, yeah, we're willing to go back. And some of the improvements that have been made already to FedEx Field make that happen. And I was talking to a Commanders official about some of that. I think there's actually going to be more stuff coming. I've heard a bunch of rumblings about that over the last couple of weeks. Who knows how quickly those announcements come. But, there is more improvement happening to FedEx Field. And there is already more improvement since Josh Harris took over than there had been maybe in the previous decade under Dan Snyder. There's a couple things that happened when Brian Lafemina was here, but those projects, not all of them, I think, even got completed because Dan and Bruce went back to being Dan and Bruce. But on the ingress-egress front, Anthony, do you remember the ingress-egress conversations that we had in the offseason when Josh Harris loved to bring that stuff up and Jason Wright loved to bring that stuff up. Remember the ingress? You're working on something.
Found himself embroiled.
Are you even listening to the show right now?
I was busy pulling the sound for the
For real things? Oh, okay. That is a fair thing for you to do.
But I do remember the egress and
ingress.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Anthony was paying attention. Points for Anthony. He's a multitasker. Look at him go. But they said that they've already cut 40 minutes out of that experience for folks. Like, they are planning to cut even more by continuing to play with signage and things like that. But they were able to last year make it more efficient by like 40 minutes.
Just found himself embroiled.
Which is tremendous. And it was interesting being out in Las Vegas.
You know, boys,
especially after
I'm not mad.
so
I'm
we went to
really
the Maryland Iowa
because
game.
you both gave me buy-in before the game in the change room that you'd be able to control your players.
We didn't stay very
So
long.
did you lie to me, or is it something you can fix from now?
But specifically, getting into the parking lot was a disaster out of Maryland.
Well, that's the ultimate from Amy Barrett-Thuran, isn't it? I'm not mad, I'm disappointed. Those are the words we all fear to hear from those that matter to us.
You know, and obviously, look, College Park in Las Vegas, very different resources, very different everything, very different funding. But you just see the difference of they shut down a bunch of roads, but like it actually made it better for everyone. Like, yeah, maybe I couldn't get where I wanted to go with maximum efficiency for my own route if everything was empty, but they flow traffic in a way that you never got caught up too bad anywhere, even though the entire world seemed to be in town for the Super Bowl because they know how to run big events. And that kind of know-how and that kind of study of how to make these things better experiences for fans is something that's really important to HBSC, Harris Blitzer Sports Entertainment, and they've got experience with it at their variety of arenas, and ultimately they're bringing that to FedEx Field, and I do think that, you know, if you're U.S. Soccer, one, like the biggest thing was, can you get a regulation-sized field in there, which is going to involve removing some seats, and the people at FedEx were like, yeah, we can do that. But generally making the fan experience and the player experience better, the locker room's nicer, all those kinds of things is a big deal, and the Harris Group should absolutely be commended for the work that they've already done and continue to do, some of which will be done by the time this game happens, and some will be more next season in terms of upgrades. The Hoffman Show, we're here on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. You tuned in the middle of that. You want to hear more of my chat with Gregg Berhalter, you can on YouTube and on our podcast feed at Craig Hoffman, or just search The Hoffman Show anywhere you get your podcast. When we get back, we wrap up the show with real things real people said into real microphones. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. If you missed any part of our show today, including Nikki Jhabvala breaking news on it, you should check out the podcast feed. Just search the Hoffman Show wherever you get your podcasts. Of course, the video on YouTube at Craig Hoffman at the Team 980 on demand for your listening pleasure as well. All right. Anything else housekeeping-wise tomorrow? Linnell's going to be on the show. Never read the comments on a Wednesday. Anything else in particular that we know of at this time, Anthony?
Maybe we'll get our assistant head coach.
Maybe. Get a D-line coach?
Yeah, that too.
Some more help in the defensive backfield, some figuring out of official stuff on the offensive side. Could be. Could be. Other than that, I think that's it. And we got some good stuff for real things. So I say we get to real things, shall we? Anything else, Anthony? Any objections from the crowd?
No objections.
No objections. We proceed.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11. Not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
All right, let's see where we want to go first. First, how about this? This was a very cool moment yesterday. Seth Curry making his debut for the Charlotte Hornets wearing 30 as his dad, who is a Hornets broadcaster, used to do.
Glass, tip it out, line it up, son. Yeah, hold the ball through. Welcome home.
That's good stuff. That's pretty cool. You can see your jersey out there, your name on it, your son. That's pretty good. UCLA announced one of my favorite players as a kid, actually, Deshaun Foster. He was a Carolina Panthers running back for a long time, as their head coach after Chip Kelly left to be an OC at Ohio State. What? Wackadoodle. But here's how that announcement went down, and let's just say it was well received by UCLA players.
We want somebody that wants to be a Bruin. Well, we didn't get somebody that wants to be a Bruin. We got a Bruin. Come on out, coach. Your new head coach.
That is cool. They absolutely mobbed Deshaun Foster. He had been the running backs coach there, left to actually take a job with Vegas, and ironically left Vegas. I pulled a Cliff Kingsbury. Although it was a little bit different because he's like, hey man, AP, I gotta go back home, and gotta be the head coach of my alma mater. Very cool for Deshaun Foster and UCLA. All right, I've been hinting at this one all show. This is from the U20 Rugby World Cup. There was a scrum, and the referee had a very particular way of ensuring that it would not happen. Not a rugby scrum, like a fisticuff scrum, and that's not what she wanted. Oh, hold on, that's the wrong sound bite. Clickety clack. Here we go.
Henry Pollock just found himself embroiled a little bit of stuff.
You know, boys, I'm not mad. I'm just really disappointed because you both gave me buy-in before the game in the change room that you'd be able to control your players. So did you lie to me, or is it something you can fix from now?
We'll fix it.
Thank you. Speak to both your teams. Thank you.
Well, that's the ultimate from Amy Barrett-Theron, isn't it? I'm not mad, I'm disappointed. Those are the words we all fear to hear from those that matter to us.
That cut so deep, Anthony. I'm not mad, I'm disappointed. Did you lie to me, or can you fix it? Whew! You want to get something done? She should referee everything.
That hurts.
I felt responsible for that.
Those are some deep cutting words, I would say. Because you don't want to hear that at all. Especially you definitely don't want to hear it from your parents. That's where you really don't want to hear it from.
No. Let me see if I can find this Andy Reid thing. I think you found something that's funny and good, but that's not the thing that I was looking for. Andy Reid, Peter King. If not, we'll play it for you tomorrow. let's see. Where did it go? Where did it go? Here we go. All right, so you want to hear the play call that won the Super Bowl? Ready, sound up. Here we go.
Tiger 12. So that puts McCall in. And 2 tight ends, 1 running back.
Yeah.
Tom and Jerry Wright, one-way play. We don't have a lot of one-way plays, but this is it.
Yep.
And it's gun, trips right bunch, F shuttle.
Okay.
And that gives you a little corn dog with some,
let me ask you this. What is the part of that play that denotes the motion?
The shuttle. X shuttle.
Okay, shuttle. All right.
Easy X.
Okay.
Tiger 12.
So you got Tiger 12. I also think it's they kind of goofed up one part there. Andy initially called it F shuttle, but we don't have an F shuttle. We got an X shuttle. But it's great because like the way this is presented, announcer Skeds has this on Twitter where I'm getting it from. I'm sure Peter King put this out as well. As he's the reporter here who's gathering this, or the Chiefs, or whoever did it. But you can see like the play unfold, and they have that shuttle motion, which causes a whole bunch of defensive issues. Mecole's the guy they want running it. They get the right personnel grouping. You just hear it all come together. Very cool stuff. More cool stuff tomorrow on the Hoffman Show.